Welcome to the show. Here this evening is trainer Tim to share with us his thoughts concerning muscle length and tension, and how this applies to your training.
Thanks for having me.
So, you're an expert on muscle and muscle training. One area that has interested me is the muscle length and tension relationships. Can you elaborate on the connection between the two?
Sure. When discussing the relationship, we have to think of an isometric contraction perspective.
Isn't isometric contraction where the length of your muscle is constant and no change of length takes place?
That's right. Generally, people associate isotonic contractions with training.
And that's not the case.
Not exactly. To discuss and understand the length-tension relationship, you first have to apply it isometrically in order for it to be useful in your training. The muscle's contractile properties rely on the muscle's length and degree of which it contracts. Even though no length appears to change to the naked eye, changes must happen at the sarcomere level to produce tension.
So, as muscle length changes, how does this affect tension?
As muscle length shortens, the amount of total tension generated decreases. Total tension is the sum of passive tension and active tension.
What is the difference between the two?
Initially, passive tension comes from the non-contractile components of your muscle. Specifically, connective tissues, epimysium, perimysium, and endomysium. The second main component to passive tension is the protein titin, which provides structural support for sarcomeres and limits the range of motion in the sarcomere in tension, contributing to the passive stiffness of muscle.
What would you say passive tension's role in this process is?
Passive tension's role in the cross-bridge cells is seen at the end range of motion, or in other words, when the sarcomere is maximally contracted or maximally extended.
Is it fair to assume that the greatest amount of tension is obtained from active tension then?
That's correct. Active tension is advantageous to total tension because there is optimal filament overlap. This optimal filament overlap occurs within the middle range of motion, or more specifically when the sarcomere length is between 2 and 2.25 micrometers. This corresponding sarcomere length is also where there is the greatest number of highly bound cross bridges formed, ready to produce a power stroke. This is where we produce the greatest amount of force.
How does this apply to real-life setting that our viewers at home can relate with?
For example, when resistance training, hypertrophy is directly correlated to the tension on a specific muscle and the time that tension is applied. A bicep curl, a common exercise almost everyone can demonstrate, explains this very easily. Active tension will be greased in the middle ranges of your motion and will result in the most work done for that muscle, stimulating muscle growth.
So, at 90 degrees there will be the greatest amount of tension, correct?
Correct. If you want to increase your muscle size and strength, limit your range of motion approximately to joint angles between 70 to 170 degrees.
It is important to keep within these ranges because
when you decrease that angle to less than 70 degrees, there is a significant decrease in force generated because of the decreased calcium sensitivity. This is the idea that for a given amount of calcium concentration present in the sarcomere, there is less force generated at shorter sarcomere lengths. As it shortens, the actin and myosin space is increased, making their cross-bridge interaction less likely to happen, resulting in less force.
Is there a way to increase the force generated at these unfavorable lengths?
An area currently under heavy research is the phenomenon of post-activation potentiation.
And what does that entail?
Post-activation potentiation refers to enhancing myosin head mobility by phosphorylation of the myosin light chains. Greater phosphorylation results in faster rates of contraction and tension, creating more tension at unfavorable lengths. This has been done by loaded training prior to explosive training in athletes. The heavy load primes the conditions needed to increase sensitivity to calcium. If the net effect of this overrides fatigue, the explosive movement will produce more force, resulting in both acute and chronic gains in performance.
Does post-activation potentiation apply to everyone?
Prior training status is highly correlated with it, meaning highly trained athletes generally see greatest results.
That sounds very exciting. I look forward to hearing more about that in the future. Can you summarize a take-home message for our guests wanting to improve their training?
Of course. People need to be aware of exercise range of motion and how it affects tension. Increase in performance results from increased training in active tension. Lastly, if individuals try heavy loading prior to explosive exercise to increase post-activation potentiation, following these tips will benefit your training.
Great job. Thank you for all the sound advice. It was a pleasure to have you on the show. Good night.